Hi, welcome back to my channel where we are unpacking and deconstructing all of the things that we were taught growing up in fundamentalist and evangelical churches. My name is Christy, and today I'm going to be continuing on this new series that I've started where I'm reading through old Bible stories that we were taught mostly in Sunday school, but growing up in these churches and seeing what we get out of them now that we're not reading them through the lens of our indoctrination, now that we're not just kind of breezing through them with our pastors or Sunday school and teachers' interpretation, clouding how we read these stories. A lot of us that grew up in these fundamentalist and evangelical churches, we were taught that these stories in the Bible, even in the Old Testament, these very mythological stories, were actual literal historical accounts. These things actually happen. And so when I make these videos and I talk about these stories, I will be reading these at face value. I'm not going to be digging into the ancient language. I understand that these stories don't necessarily belong to Christians, though Christians have appropriated these stories. They have made them their own and they have decided how they interpret them. My channel seeks to deconstruct these fundamentalists, these very kind of literal interpretations of these texts, because so many people are raised to believe that that's what they are. And so I really like to kind of look at that through that lens and get people to really think about these stories if they've been taught that they're supposed to believe these as literal accounts. So that's what I'm going to be doing today with the story of Lot and Sodom. This is one of my favorite stories to talk about. I really like talking about it because the way they presented this story in the church, very different from how I read it today. If you ever heard, a sermon preached on Lot and Sodom, you probably remember it this way. Sodom was an evil, evil, wicked city full of homosexuals, and they were all kissing one another, and God did not like that. And so God had to destroy the city, but first he had to save Lot and his family because, well, that's just how merciful and gracious God is. And so he spared Lot, he spared his family, well, except for his wife. We'll get to that one. He spared them, and then destroyed the entire city because everyone in it was just so evil and wicked. And it was because of their homosexuality. That was a very important part of the story. I always believed that the main message of Lot and Sodom was that you shouldn't be gay. Don't be gay, because God is very angry about people being gay, and he will destroy them all with raining fire from the sky if they engage in homosexuality, as they said. Starting in chapter 19, verse 1, 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth, and he said, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way." They said, "No, we will spend the night in the town square." But he pressed them strongly. So they turned aside to him and entered his house, and he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. I think this is just supposed to be symbolizing the importance of hospitality at this time. There are 2 strange men in the city. They walk up to the gates, and Lot is showing them kindness and hospitality. He says, "Do not sleep in the city. Come to my house. I'll cook for you. You can lay your head down, and then you can, be on your way." Lot does not seem to know that these are angels. They are not having any kind of conversation about being angels or being sent from the Lord. He doesn't seem to know anything about that. So to him, these are just 2 men walking up to the gates of the city. In verse 4, "But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all of the people to the last man, surrounded the house. And they called to Lot, 'Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them.' Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, 'I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do with them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof.'" Okay. So Lot has brought these men in. And then all of the men from the city come to the door and they start banging on the door and they say, "Hey, you've got 2 really good looking guys in there and we like them. So can you just send them out here because We want to know them. This is where they get this idea, that everybody was gay and it was just full of homosexuality and sexual immorality. I think the sexual immorality is the desire to rape people. I think their wickedness is the fact that they're willing to assault people. It doesn't seem like the city is full of gay people. It seems like the city is full of rapists. But does the church like to spin it that way? Because they didn't in my church. In my church, it was all about their sexual orientation, not about their desire to attack people and to harm people. It seems like that should have been the message. But my church got really hung up on the fact that it was just men wanting to sleep with men. And they really like to use this to further discriminate against those in the LGBTQ plus community. I think this is a very convenient way for them to associate violent behavior with being gay. So they can say, see, look at these, they're trying to have sex with men. They're doing all these terrible things. Look at how wicked they are. No, they're wicked because they're trying to attack people. But moving on to verse 7, he says, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Don't do such a wicked thing. Because I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you and you can do whatever you want with them. Don't act so wickedly. Why would you take my guests and have sex with them? That is so wicked. I've got daughters right here. You can just take them instead. I have talked to Christians about this. And I'm not saying these were well-educated Christians, okay? But I have talked to Christians about this that justify this by saying, well, back then, it was really important to show hospitality to your house guests. Protecting your house guests was the most important thing you could do. And so it's just showing that he was just a very hospitable man by protecting his house guests and offering his daughters up to be assaulted by the men of the city instead. This isn't looking good for Lot. Okay, it's not. If Lot is offering his daughters up to be assaulted by the city, then he is just as bad as everybody else in that city. So we assume that because he is so wicked and bad, that he's going to go down with the city too, right? But they said, stand back. This fellow has become the judge. Now we will deal with you worse than with them. And they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door down. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great. So they wore themselves out, groping for the door. I love how they say like the men did this to the men. They're really not specific here. It kind of confuses the language. They're like, who's doing what to who? But what they're saying is that the angels, these 2 house guests, they struck these men with blindness and they were not able to see. So this gave Lot and his family the opportunity to get away. And then it says in verse 12, then the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here, sons-in-laws, sons, daughters, or anyone else in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place because the outcry against his people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-laws who were to marry his daughters, up, get out of the place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-laws to be jesting. If 2 men just walked up to the gates of my city or walked up to my front door and I brought them in as house guests, which I wouldn't do, but if I did, and then they tell me that they are sent from the Lord to destroy the whole city, I might not be inclined to believe them. Now, they did just strike these men with blindness, so I guess they showed some sort of power there. And Christians will argue, well, they showed that they, were working for the Lord because of the power, I guess. I don't know. But if I were the sons-in-laws, I'd think he was joking too. Like, I think that's a pretty normal human reaction to be like, I don't really buy what you're selling here. I don't really believe you. Where were the sons-in-laws when all of this was happening? Did they not hear this going on? I mean, there's this riot outside of this man's house. I don't think the author really thought these things through, okay? I really don't. So in verse 15, as the morning dawned and the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he lingered. So the man seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. And as they brought him out, One said, "Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords, behold, your servant has found favor in your sight. You've shown me great kindness in saving my life, but I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Behold, the city is near enough to flee to. It is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved." He said to him, "Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there." Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. So basically, these two men who are not God and who they have to just believe, trust that have been sent from God, say, "Get out of here. Don't look back." Fair. Okay. Get out of here. Don't look back. I get it. I get it. Right. But let's see what happens when one of them does look back. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar, and the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Her home was burning to the ground behind her. Sulfur and fire were raining from the heavens. And she turned around and looked. That's all it says, is that Lot's wife behind him looked back. She looked back. That's it. That's all she did. Instantly turned into a pillar of salt. What is the lesson there? Because in the church, they'll say the lesson is, well, she disobeyed God. God told her not to look back, and she disobeyed him. And that's what you get when you disobey God. Well, first of all, I think that's a little authoritarian. I don't know why the rule needs to be that she doesn't look back. I think that if you give a rule, there needs to be a good reason for that rule. But God did not tell her not to look back. God never spoke to her. God was not there. Two random strangers told her not to look back. So the message isn't just obey whatever God tells you. The message is obey whatever two strangers tell you that claim to be from God. And I think that's a very convenient message for a pastor to preach to his congregation. Hey, I'm a man of God, and if you don't listen to men of God, well, there are serious consequences. See what happened to Lot's wife. That's a very convenient message to spread to your congregation. And I really think this is used so often to kind of paint women in a very bad light. Look at women. They're so rebellious. Look at what Eve did. She didn't listen to God. She disobeyed. She ate from the tree. God told her not to. God didn't tell her not to. Adam told her not to. So again, she was supposed to listen to the man. Look at Lot's wife. Lot's wife looked back when she was told not to, and she disobeyed and rebelled against God, and look what happened to her. Again, God didn't tell her anything. Men did. The moral of the story is, women, listen to men. Listen to what men tell you. And if men tell you they are from God, you're supposed to trust them. And you're supposed to obey them. And if you don't, well, you deserve whatever happens to you. Nobody mourns Lot's wife. Nothing else is ever said about Lot's wife. But because she looked behind her, a normal human reaction, back at her city as it burned to the ground, back at her home as it burned to the ground, she was punished and she was turned into salt. Now, there's a lot of mythology here. There's a lot of reasons to believe why she was turned into salt. We're not going to get into all of that. This is, again, we're just kind of approaching this through that kind of fundamentalist, literalist lens. So verse 27, and Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down on Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all of the land of the valley. He looked back, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham, sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. Lot made it out. His wife did not, because Lot is apparently a righteous man according to the New Testament. It says, if God saved Lot, a righteous man. So throughout all of this, the reason Lot is preserved is because he is a good and righteous man, even though he just offered his daughters up to be assaulted by men in the city. All Lot's wife did was look back. She didn't offer her daughters up to be raped. But she deserved the consequences of those actions. She was so rebellious. She was so wicked. She deserved to just be snapped out of existence. But Lot, he was a righteous man. He was spared because he was righteous. When was Lot reprimanded for offering his daughters up to be assaulted by the men of the city? When does the Bible condemn his actions? Because I don't see it. I see the Bible calling him a righteous man long after it happened. But he's never condemned for what he did to his daughters, for offering his daughters up to be assaulted. But it runs in the family because if we keep reading, some very interesting things happened with Lot and his daughters. In verse 30, now Lot went up out of Zoar and lived in the hills with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to live in Zoar. So he lived in a cave with his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come in to us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she arose. The next day the firstborn said to the younger, behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. And then you go in and lie with him, and that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. Wow, that's a lot to unpack, huh? I've I've heard people say that it's likely that whoever wrote this was trying to spin the story in a way where it made it seem as though Lot was the victim of his daughters, and that was the reason they became pregnant by him, when in reality, it might have been the other way around. I think that this story is just mythology. I think it's obvious that it's mythology, but in the event that it's not, we have violence, we have rape, we have incest. Like, yeah, they had to repopulate the earth. What else were they supposed to do? I don't know. I think an all-powerful God could figure that one out, but apparently it was more important for people to be fruitful and multiply than it was for them to maintain a healthy relationship with their parents. The Bible, especially at this time, was full of incest. Lots of incest. In our last story, Noah's flood, the entire earth was repopulated with just one family. And it goes into this story. There's a lot going on in the family. Okay, but I just really want to focus on the fact that out of all of this, Lot is still considered a good man. He's still considered a righteous man. He did the right thing. He's never condemned. It is the evil, wicked women that are always just messing things up. Lot's wife looking back. And I don't really understand why God would want this story included in his book. I don't know what lesson he's trying to get you to get out of this story other than obey house guests that tell you they're from God and are going to destroy the city. What is the lesson? What is the moral? What are you supposed to get out of this? I mean, I know what they tell us in the church that we're supposed to get out of it, but when I read it, I'm not getting the message that the church gave us at all. And then I'm having more questions than answers, because this is obviously not meant to be taken literal. This is obviously some kind of a mythological story meant to convey something from that time. I don't know how this could or should apply to us today, but I do know how pastors are using it. I do know what lessons pastors want us to get out of it. They want us to obey men. They want us to not be gay. They want us to do whatever God says and accept the consequences that come if you don't. And they want us to appreciate that God would show so much mercy on such a righteous man, such as Lot. When you're a good, righteous person, God will spare you. He will save you. It doesn't matter if you offer your daughters up to be assaulted by men in the city. That's okay. You're allowed to do that because at least you were nice to your house guests. At least you showed them hospitality. And that's what's really important. I don't know, guys. This one's weird. This one's really, really weird. And I just can't get over the fact that Lot is called a righteous man. I'm not saying anybody in the story is good. Honestly, I think the only good one in this story was Lot's wife. How often do they tell us that Lot's wife looked back in longing? She wanted to go back to the city. She wanted to be back in that evil, wicked town, and that's why she had to be destroyed. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that she looked back longing. They add that to the text. They add that because they have to justify why God would just get rid of her for looking back. So they embellish the story to make her seem like she was more evil than she was. But she didn't seem to be portrayed in that light. She wasn't the one offering her daughters up to be assaulted by men in the city. She just was seeing a catastrophic event happen and her home burn, and she turned around naturally like any human being would do. But apparently acting like a normal human being and doing normal human things is rebellion, but offering your daughters up to be assaulted is righteous. That is the lesson I get out of this story. Let me know what you thought in the comments. There's definitely a lot I missed in terms of, the original context and language and the historical context and, the mythology surrounding the story and what it was attempting to convey. There's probably an entirely different message, but that is not what I'm here to address today. I wish people would think about it more. I wish people would actually sit down and read these stories for themselves and not just let their pastor tell them what it says and what they're supposed to get out of it. Because pastors embellish these stories, they add to it, and they create their own narrative so that they can use it to push an agenda. And the agenda is usually, I am a man of God, God spoke to me, and he told me that you're supposed to obey and listen to what I say. You're supposed to take whatever I say on faith. You're supposed to just trust it and obey it. And if you don't, well, there could be serious consequences for you, and you would deserve those consequences. Big red flag. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for your support. You can like, comment, share, subscribe, do all of the things if you want to support my channel, support my videos, and have my videos be seen by more people. You can follow me on TikTok if you want more of my hot takes, Christy.Burke. I also have a merch shop, jezebelvibes.com/shop. I'll link that in the description. And I'll see you next time.